Welcome to Codex, History of Video Games. My name's Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta.
And this week, you may notice that our introductions are a little bit more in sync because we're actually in the same room finally.
For the first time in 4 years?
4 or 5 years?
4 or 5 years recording together, we're in the same room. Tyler's visiting me.
Yeah. So we are actually like doing this like the old days.
We are doing it like the old days, and we're recording it in my bedroom full of Lego and video game stuff. It's a kid's bedroom.
Which is, well, when we recorded it in my office a couple of times, it was also like
video games and toys. It was.
We're both video games and toys and Legos.
It's really cool stuff. That's what it is.
Yeah.
But today we are going to continue our history of Nintendo before video games.
Wow, which is crazy to me to think that there is a time for Nintendo before video games, and it is way longer than the time they have been doing video games. Yeah.
It's, when they like talk about human history and like 200 years of it's like Industrial Revolution and everything else was like hunter-gatherer. That's what we're like right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's where we're in the hunter-gatherer phase
of
Nintendo.
We are the hunter-gatherers of Nintendo. So there probably is going to be one more episode after this of Nintendo before video games, but I'm going to explain the caveat to that at the end. So we're just going to get into it, okay? Once again, we're talking about Nintendo before video games, specifically the 1970s is what we're talking about today. And all of my sources are coming from one book called The History of Nintendo, 1889 to 1980, From Playing Cards to Game & Watch by Florent Gorges. I thought it was Gorges. Pretty sure it's Gorges, according to the internet. Okay,
you got too hyper on the.
I was Frenching it up too much. It is a French book originally that was translated into English, but we're going to focus on specifically electromechanical games in the 1970s that Nintendo created and their first forays into arcade games, which is going to be fun.
So we are getting into some video games here.
We are. We're getting into some games.
Okay.
There is video involved. We'll get to that. That's actually pretty exciting.
Video involved games, but not video games.
Not video games. Okay,
gotcha.
So where we last left off, Nintendo had the light gun technology that we talked about, where, that's kind of the basis of the zapper in Nintendo on the NES for people that aren't aware. But they also had an office supply business, and we're dabbling into what I'm going to call baby stuff, like strollers and rockers, etc., right?
I want a Nintendo stroller.
That'd be cool. Like an adult stroller?
Yeah. That you can push
around in.
Yeah.
Okay, good. We'll work on that. I'm sure we can figure that out. So Gorges points out that Nintendo, while known for video games in the late 80s and early 90s, did actually compete with Sega and Taito earlier on in the 1970s with arcade entertainment. And this really started with a topic I've been anxiously awaiting to talk about with you, the laser clay shooting system. Have you heard of this?
No, but it sounds an awful lot like Duck Hunt.
It is an awful lot like Duck Hunt, and I'm glad you said that. So the story goes that this all started when Hiroshi Yamauchi read a newspaper article about the competitive clay shooting scene in Japan. Like, this is a sport in Japan, competitive clay shooting with a shotgun, like a real gun.
Shooting real bullets at real
targets. Yes.
Targets.
And this sparked an idea. Can we create this with our light gun technology? And more importantly, can we make this an experience? Almost a sport in its own? And he immediately contacted Gunpei Yokoi, got him on the task of creating what would become the laser clay shooting system. Now, for a little bit of history and context of Japanese culture in the 1970s and 1960s, in the 60s, bowling had taken over as the fun family pastime in Japan. It was like a craze, like a national craze. Like, think Pokemon cards in the U.S. in the 90s, like that kind of level of craze. It was insane. Everyone was bowling, right? Then, in the 1970s, the trend shifted, and this time it shifted to karaoke, which I would argue is still prevalent.
It never left.
Yeah, karaoke.
I have done karaoke in Japan.
Was it cool?
It was very cool. I did it with Matt in Japan, yeah.
Oh, I'm so jealous. What did you sing?
I sang a lot of Blink-182 songs and Persona songs. We sang Persona songs.
You never seen it coming. Like that? We can't sing more than that because then we'll get knocked off of YouTube. I like to think that you and Matt both sang Blink-182 and one of you was Tom DeLonge and one of you was Mark Hoppus. Is that how it went?
I don't think that's what
that was a golden opportunity.
Where are you?
And I'm so okay. We got to keep moving on. So it's really this is a whole different vibe now that we're in the same room again. This is great.
Yeah.
So the the thing about the bowl, like when they shifted from bowling to karaoke as a pastime in Japan, that means all these bowling alleys were empty and starting to go out of business. And that's the potential Hiroshi Yamauchi saw in the laser clay shooting system. Imagine an indoor, safe, family-friendly shooting competition using Nintendo's light gun technology, not real guns, in these old bowling alleys.
That sounds perfect because the bowling alley is like a long ways away. You get the distance factor, right? That sounds perfect.
Everything's already set up for you. You just got to make it, right? And so the first thing Gunpei Yokoi asked Yamauchi for was to buy him a gun, like a real gun.
Can you do that in Japan? Maybe in the 70s.
I mean, I think it's like hunting-wise you can, right? So maybe Matt in Japan will know.
Yeah. What are gun laws like
in Japan? Can you buy a gun in Japan? Yeah. But he needed to know what to base his prototype light gun off of, right? He needed to make it as realistic looking as possible. And when I show you like a picture, I'll show you in the book, a picture of the guns used in this. They look like real shotguns. They don't have an orange tip on them. They're very much like, they look like a real gun. So that Gunpei Yokoi made this and built a prototype, and then the design was built specifically for like ball trap shooting, which I'm not entirely sure what that is. I've seen also though like ducks in this. I was kind of watching and reading. There's nothing you can watch. You can't really. I tried to find video of someone playing this. It doesn't really exist.
Yeah. Cameras in the 70s where people weren't just pulling them out of their pockets like they are now.
Exactly. So I just saw a lot of pictures and stuff, and it looked very similar to Duck Hunt. I'll explain what it is in a moment. But essentially, they made the technology, they got it set up. Nintendo began to purchase bowling alleys in 1971. And then in 1973, Nintendo created another subsidiary company. Who knew that Nintendo would make all these? Called the Nintendo Leisure System Company Limited. And then the laser craze was born. Laser shooting. So Nintendo,
they had a big hit even way before they had games. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, well, there's a caveat to this in a second. Before I get to that, let's explain how this works. Okay. So the guns, first and foremost, like I said, looked like real guns. And there was no orange tip. Like it didn't look like the Zapper. It was a shotgun. Players would look at a wall that was painted with an outdoor scene of like forests or mountains. And then the projection of a duck or a clay pigeon would appear, and the player would shoot it for a score, and the screen would like flash, and then the duck or pigeon would fall down. This is very much early Duck Hunt.
Duck Hunt.
100%. Yeah. And what's interesting is when we get to some other shooting games later in the episode, those are going to be NES games too, which is kind of cool. So the difference between this is a whole room full of like consoles and projection screens and chairs that like go down a hallway instead of just being on your TV. And people could just sit in a group and take turns shooting. And it was very much like bowling, but with Duck Hunt.
That sounds fun. I would do that today.
Yeah, me too. It was super fun.
Yeah.
So, and this was a success at first because the idea was extremely well received by the public, and the test locations were always full. Like other entertainment companies like arcades and bowling alleys everywhere were ordering so many of the laser clay shooting system machines. In a way, like bowling alley owners thought, this is how we come back from karaoke taking over, right? And I'm sure a lot of those bowling alleys just started having karaoke, realistically. Like that's probably what happened.
You could probably retrofit a bowling alley to be a good karaoke bar.
Yeah.
Were these like, so were they like karaoke, like American style? It must have been Japanese style, where it's like you go in a little room. And
I think it was you go to a
friends.
little room and sing with your friends. Okay. Yeah, that's, which I think, because American style karaoke is very different, isn't it?
You get up in front of the whole bar.
That's so different.
And
I don't know why.
You get to sing maybe one song because there's so many people in line. You just have to wait.
That is... I never noticed that there was a difference between American versus Japanese karaoke. Is Japanese karaoke better, you think?
It depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to like, if you want to like put on a show and like do a performance, probably doing it to a whole bar is more fun. If your goal is to like, I want to sing songs, you will sing many more songs in a small room with just your friends.
That's nice though. That's an interesting... I want a history of karaoke podcast. I don't think we need to do that. Yeah, I think someone else can do that.
Yeah.
But I would listen to that.
Yeah.
Okay. So... and like I said, like other entertainment companies like arcades and bowling alleys were ordering these to the point that Nintendo had dedicated factories running day and night to manufacture these laser clay shooting systems. Now, these machines were not cheap, okay? The price tag was between 4 and 4.5 million yen. And I did little bit of historical exchange rate magic using the power of the internet. And that puts each one of these machines at a price of around 17,000 US dollars. That's 1973.
Oh, so we do an
US
inflation
dollars.
calculator.
Didn't even do inflation calculator. So
It's at least double. Let's call it 50 grand today. In today's money, probably.
Expensive.
Maybe more.
And everything about the laser clay shooting system matched the early beginnings of the bowling craze in the 1960s, which is why everyone thought this is going to be a hit. Like everything was pointing to this being a smash hit for Nintendo. Then, on October 18th, 1973, disaster struck.
I like that there's an exact date for this.
There is, because this is not a global history podcast, but on October 18th, 1973, due to an extreme price hike by oil-producing companies in the Middle East, the world was dragged into an oil crisis. This is where you see like pictures of people lined up at the gas pump in America.
Yeah.
And the gas was way more expensive than it ever should have been.
And they set the speed limit to 55 so so cars would be more efficient, so they wouldn't use as much gas.
Which made Sammy Hagar write a song about not being able to drive 55. It all links together.
Yep.
The oil prices were so bad at this time that the Japanese government, who imported 98% of their fuel from outside countries, was warning citizens and businesses of a potential recession. And in a recession, the first thing people often cut is unnecessary spending. Now, I don't know about you and I, but I feel like for most people, the laser clay shooting system is not considered necessary spending.
I don't know. For now that I've heard about it, I feel like it is necessary for me.
You have a monthly laser clay shooting system budget?
Yes, and I will sacrifice many things for it.
Yeah, food, water, sleep,
shelter.
Well, you could sleep in the laser clay shooting system. There you go.
They do that. Back to karaoke. Matt in Japan was telling me that like sometimes if you like miss your train or something, you just like need a place to like take a nap while you wait a few hours for the trains to come back. It's like you can just rent out a karaoke room and it's like a decent place to just take a nap.
Oh wow, Matt's got all the life hacks of living in Japan.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm so jealous you got to hang out with Matt, but now I get to hang out with you. Yay!
Yeah.
Okay. So overnight, all of the orders for the laser clay shooting system were canceled. And many attempts were made by Nintendo to try to salvage the millions of dollars Nintendo put into R&D and production, including the production of a mini laser clay system in 1974. Yamauchi himself attests this was one of the worst times during his reign at Nintendo, acknowledging that if they were not a publicly traded company with shareholders, Nintendo would not have survived.
Oh,
this
wow.
was disaster for Nintendo. It's pretty miraculous they went through this, especially after like putting all that time and money into the laser clay shooting system. But they are going to salvage it because the mini laser clay is actually what got Nintendo into arcades.
Oh.
Because now the bowling alley thing didn't work out. They're not making their own laser clay shooting system alleys, but they can still make the technology smaller and sell it to other arcade companies, right? And so the mini laser clay, the marketing of it, I'm going to read the marketing message that's in the book. It's, quote, "With such a machine in your arcade venue, you will undoubtedly draw the attention of the whole neighborhood," end quote. So it was pretty popular. So here's the book description of the mini laser clay. I'm just going to read it off just verbatim from the book so we all kind of know why it's a little bit different. The mini laser clay was a minimized version of the laser clay previously found in bowling alleys. It provided 2 shooting ranges for up to 4 players simultaneously. 100 yen allowed players to shoot 10 plates. Launched when a small pear-shaped button was pressed at their feet. Each target could be fired twice. It was possible, depending on the score, to win tokens and exchange them for various prizes. So this was very much like a Chuck E. Cheese kind of atmosphere going on with the laser clay shooting system.
Charles Entertainment Cheese.
He
was looking closely at this.
He was like, wait a second. Because, there was no Chuck E. Cheese here yet, but
Nolan Bushnell was like, he was thinking about it.
Did you go to any really awesome arcades when you were in Japan?
Yeah, they're everywhere.
Really?
There's actually a lot of like gotcha machines, like a lot of claw machines.
Did you play what's the game we talked about, the pachinko? Did you play pachinko?
I didn't play any pachinko, no, but Matt and my friend Nick did win a giant Pikachu from a claw machine.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's pretty sweet.
Okay, so sorry everyone, we're getting distracted. Tyler and I are also catching up this episode, so it's kind of hard to keep track. Okay.
I haven't talked to you in a couple of weeks, really.
I know, and I was in Africa, so we'll talk about that at the end of the podcast. Okay, here we go. So These machines were still expensive to make. That was kind of their big issue and why people weren't buying them as fast. So in order to cut costs, Gunpei Yokoi decided to shift the cabinet to use 16 millimeter film projectors. This was cheaper, but it was also smaller. So
what did they use before? Did they not? Did they use?
They were like full. I mean, they didn't say, but they were like full on projectors, like a
projectors.
movie theater projector. Yeah, which is why it was so big in the bowling alleys. And then the mini laser clay system was a little bit smaller. And now these new machines, these 16 millimeter projectors, and I am just completely spitballing off of what I've seen online and in videos, probably about like 10 feet wide of projection. You know, so it's a little bit, it could be in like a corner of a room and you can have it there, right? The first of these cabinets and these cabinets were known as simulation systems. There's actually 6 of these, the simulation systems, but the first one was called Wild Gunman, which is a Nintendo game.
It is. And do you remember in Back to the Future Part 2 when he plays, I'm pretty sure he plays Wild Gunman he goes to the Pepsi bar.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, I know this game because it's like, it was in the 70s and 80s, right? And he plays Wild Gunman. He kicks everybody's butt.
Yeah. Does he play this version or does he play the NES version?
I think he plays. Oh, I don't remember if it's like a mechanical. I think it's a mechanical version.
If it's a mechanical version, it's pretty cool because that means you get to wear like a holster and stuff. I'll explain it in a bit. But
oh wow, okay.
So
maybe it wasn't that then.
The Wild Gunman simulation system. It is essentially a player would duel against 5 cowboys in like a Wild West shootout. And what's really cool about this game is I watched YouTube footage of it. Is they're like cowboys on a film, like a movie. It's like you're playing in a movie, right?
Oh.
So. A cowboy is putting up their saddle and they turn, they notice you, and then they draw their gun, and then that's when you have to like draw and shoot, right? And essentially you just want to shoot before they do, and if you hit them, then it they still fire, but you don't die, and then the footage cuts immediately to them dying. It's like kind of a very fancy film cutting technology to make this work.
That's cool.
It's kind of hard to explain, but the transition is relatively smooth for the technology. I think they had 2 film reels going, and they would switch one really quickly to make it so oh, you hit, so now they're dying. Oh, you died, so now they stay. It's kind of like that. But the cool thing about these is they actually were really popular and they made it so that more iterations of these simulation systems came out. And this is one of the things that really saved Nintendo. So we're going to talk about the other simulation systems in a bit, but the book points out something that is very not Nintendo. And I need to talk about this, and this is not safe for work, so we're going to clean it up as much as we can. But there is an unreleased game for Nintendo that uses the simulation system, and it's called Fascination. And instead of 5 different cowboys in a shootout against the player, this time it was a Swedish woman in a dress dancing. Then she would stop in the middle of her dance moves, you'd shoot the gun, and her clothes would fly off. And you would do that until she was completely naked. It's pretty clear.
And that was made by Nintendo.
This was made by Nintendo.
Wow. In
their offices, never released. It is pretty clear while it wasn't released because it was not safe for work. Now, the funny part is there's an interview in the book about how the guy's like, yeah, it was never released, but it was in the Nintendo office and it was very popular. And he laughed. Gunpei Yokoi, there's a quote by him in an article I read when I was kind of doing background research on this, that something wasn't right with the machine, and that's right, it never worked, there was a mechanism that was broken. There's no way to substantiate this. They didn't reference it. I couldn't find anything. Where did that come from? Was there an interview or something I missed? So I'm just telling you that for the sake of completeness with this. But I think we all know really the reason it didn't come out is this is adult entertainment from Nintendo. But just wanted to let you know they're doing other things. Okay,
they're experimenting.
They're really
finding
trying things out. They really are. But the main issue with these simulation systems was brightness. That was the big problem because it's on film, right? So if you're in a bright room and you're playing a film, no one can see it. So Wild Gunman and future simulation system games needed to have panels surrounding the video and projector. So actually, the video I watched of a person playing Wild Gunman, it was they just had 2x4s going along the walls of it to cover that. So it was you're looking down a hallway, a dark hallway, essentially, into the game. But realistically, not enough of a problem to make it so these weren't popular. So there's some, I'm going to list some machines here. Now, Wild Gunman was the first simulation system. Then they had Shooting Trainer in 1976. Skyhawk, which was a plane dogfighting game in 1976, Battle Shark in 1977, the sequel to Shooting Trainer, New Shooting Trainer, very creative.
Like the new 3DS.
That's right. And then the sixth and final game in the Simulation System series was Test Driver in 1978. But we can all thank the Simulation System for breathing new life into Nintendo and making it so they did not go out of business. Also, out of curiosity, went on eBay to look up if you can buy a Simulation System. Nowhere to be found. Like, I can't find any of these for sale. I don't even think they exist anymore because probably all the parts just got thrown out. You know, like arcades, if arcades owned these and they're like worthless to them, they're probably just getting rid of them, you know?
Yeah, and they're probably huge and heavy, and like the film is probably gets worn out after a while. Like you can only run the film so many times, really, right?
I didn't even think about that. The film might have degraded at this point, right? Because that was like 50 years ago.
Yep.
So anyway, I like to think there's a secret warehouse full of these games, like in Indiana Jones. That's probably what's going on.
Somebody's got a complete collection they're not telling anybody about. They're just like, let me show you this room. And walk in, like, we have all the Simulation System games. And somebody goes, what is the Simulation System?
And they're like, you'll never know.
And then they close the door and they say, you can't play.
You can't play. And then they leave. And then every morning they wake up and they cook a breakfast Hot Pocket and they go into there and play their Simulation System games to no one else is around. So before, like, that's the Simulation System, very popular, brought life into Nintendo. There's two other game types we're going to discuss today in this episode that kind of helped bring Nintendo back in the latter half of the 1970s, and these fall into two categories: mechanical games and EVR. Now, EVR is very similar as the simulation systems. Like, I believe the simulation systems used EVR just based on what they're describing, because this was a video recording technology called electronic video recording. It was developed in 1975 with a partnership between Nintendo and Mitsubishi, which is pretty interesting. But these EVR machines specifically were different than the simulation systems because this was made with Mitsubishi. Like, they owned these cabinets between Nintendo and Mitsubishi. So there were two game types for EVR. There was personal game type, which is what it's called, and mass game type. Personal only had one screen and was for one player. Mass game type could support 10 players, and it looked like a giant table with a TV on the end of it.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's kind of very similar to when you go to a casino now and you see like a table that's like an electronic game that's meant to be played with lots of people, like a video poker machine. It's kind of like that. But
they have in Japan, in one of the arcades, they had a giant virtual horse racing track, and there were probably like 20 seats of people. Like,
I love that.
Like just betting on virtual horse races.
Side tangent, one of my favorite games in a casino, and I've only seen it in Vegas, and I've only seen it in an off-strip casino. I believe it was, I don't even know if the casino was called the D. That's what it was called. I think it's changed. It's changed multiple times, but there's an electromechanical horse racing game that's like, uses little horse figurines that go around a track, and like they rotate around, entirely mechanical. There's no digital screens, no nothing. The coolest part about it, though, it takes quarters, and if you win, it dumps a bunch of quarters, which is why it's cool. Like that's the only reason why it's cool, is it dumps quarters.
Then you take those quarters to the bank.
Yeah, they give you a bucket. And the funny part about it, though, is it's so popular because it's the only quarter dropping machine left. So that's where everyone wants to be. But I played quite a bit on it. I lost money, obviously, but I had a good time. That's all that matters. So the horse racing machine, though, it's funny that you brought that up because that's exactly what this is. The EVR is a horse racing machine.
You're just betting on the horse racing.
Yeah. So that at least the first one was. The first one was called Derby Race, and in the game they would have multiple horses for a player to bet on, and then the machine would use something called the random access system to choose between 59 different video clips and put them together and generate a race. Wow. It's pretty cool, actually. So they would take real video of horses racing, make it into a story, randomized, that players would bet on before, and then it would create the story, and then the winner would get a payout.
Oh, that's awesome. That sounds really fun.
Yeah, so the horse racing had odds too, so like each horse had different odds, and somehow the machine like would operate on those odds as well. Like it's pretty advanced for the time. And there are other versions of this too. There's a car racing one instead of horses that was, I think it was just called Driver or something or whatever. Car, it might have even just been called Car Race because their names were so simple. But I couldn't tell if these were used for real gambling or if they were used for like Chuck E. Cheese style token, which is still gambling, kind of, yeah. But I can tell you in the book, they do specify that Nintendo in the late 1970s, while gambling was very rare in Japan and very monitored and used tokens, and you'd exchange the tokens for money, Nintendo did make tables for casinos, like roulette wheels and stuff, like fancy, luxurious tables to go alongside their card sales. So that's another way they made money. This is kind of a little side tangent from the games aspect we're talking about today, but just so you're aware, Nintendo's in gambling a little bit.
Okay.
You okay with that morally?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't really care. It was the 1970s.
Yeah, that's fine.
Everything's fine. So, in a way, Nintendo actually was kind of working with their roots. You know, they were doing the old school card thing still, gambling hall still. They've kind of were always like underground gambling a little bit, you know. A little
bit, yeah.
Yeah, but the EVR games, the big thing to know about them is that they were these games that would create video on races and people would like bet on them, and they were pretty cool technology for the time. But now we're going to finish with something that I enjoy thoroughly, which are mechanical games. Okay.
Like pinball or
kind of like pinball, but these ones are going to get a little weird. I hope you're ready for it.
Okay.
So the first two are not that weird. Actually, let me preface with this. I'm jumping ahead of myself. There's a thing in the book that talks about how the big problem with these mechanical games, especially in the 1970s, this is a 5-year period we're talking about here, kind of a mystery. We don't know how many mechanical games Nintendo made. We don't know how many they sold. A lot of them are just missing. Florent Gorges found essentially like a bill of sale for the 1970s that had 3 mechanical games on it. They were Smashmatic, Fancy Ball, and Deadline. And that's how he knows these exist. So that's kind of all we're really going on.
Okay.
We're going to start talking. And also, I should mention, too, Nintendo doesn't have any record of this either. They've even said that, like, we don't know what mechanical games we have. We don't have any in our archive of, like, games we keep at, like, the headquarters. They really... Because it was just kind of a time when they were just scrambling to make money and no one...
Nobody was thinking to like hold on to the stuff for archival purposes.
Yeah, like no one, like video game history was not really cared about at the time, and it wasn't even video game history yet. It was mechanical arcade game history, and no one cared at the time. I think. So we're gonna talk about the two. I'm gonna describe them as less creative ones first, and those ones are Fancy Ball and Deadline because these are just marble drop games. You know, when you go to like a Chuck E. Cheese or your local arcade, and they have the thing where you drop a marble and you control the different levers and buttons to try to navigate it into like the prize hole at the bottom. That's what they are. Not too advanced. But I'm opening up my book here because the next game called Smashmatic is something entirely different. And we're going to play a little game right now where I haven't shown this to Tyler yet. I'm going to show him a picture of the Smashmatic. And you have to tell me what you think it does.
The Smashmatic. Okay.
It's called the Smashmatic. It was released in Japan only in 1977. And here is a picture of it. It's this table right here. Do you want to take a look at that table?
Let me investigate. So what I'm seeing to start with is it kind of almost looks like an air hockey table a little bit.
A little bit like an air hockey table.
There appears to be like a lever for like moving something maybe back and forth on either side. There's like a sort of semicircle on both sides of this long like air hockey table. So like each side has its own little like semicircle with like a I don't even know what that is. It looks like almost like a blue plastic frying pan that maybe even flips. Like you're like maybe you put a ball onto it and it like throws a ball at the other side.
You're getting close. Actually, you're not that far off.
I don't know what's going on in the middle here, which is like. A half circle is sticking up out of the middle, and it seems to have some sort of like antenna on it that looks like it goes back and forth, like it sort of pivots around that semicircle that's in the middle. But I'm not sure what it does. It has something on the end. Oh, you probably hit that back and forth.
Yeah, you're close. You're getting there.
Okay, so it's like ping pong except for the ball is on a stick, and it's like arced back and forth, and so you can it looks like that circle in the middle where the ping pong ball like pivots around, it probably spins also. laterally. I don't know if that's
You
the right
kind of
word for
nailed
that.
it. Yeah, the only thing you're missing is, and it'd be hard to see in the picture, there's actually a button on each one of those levers that the player holds onto on either side, and it can like smash the paddle up to hit the ball.
To hit the ball.
And you can actually control how much force based on how hard you hit the button, which is kind of neat. So it would go back and forth that ball, and it's kind of like tennis, but it's like smash tennis.
Smash tennis.
And
Yeah.
from what was described in the book, this game would go to a score of 9, but it would never get there based on the people he talked to who played it, because the 6-minute time limit would give up before anyone scored anything. And the ball would become loose a lot and fly across the room. So I see why this game probably wasn't as popular as it should have been, but you did a really good job. That's really close to what it was. Like you pretty much nailed it. It is tennis. And it's kind of cool because it's pretty creative, I feel like, at the time, right?
It's almost like an air hockey version of tennis.
Exactly.
Like it's about the size of an air hockey table, like a smaller air hockey table. You don't touch the paddle yourself. You don't touch the ball yourself.
Yeah, it's just it's a air hockey tennis, I think, is a great way to describe it. These are the 2 bills of sale, by the way. Those are the 2 like bills of sale that had these machines on them. That's how we found it. But yeah, it's really different. It's an extremely different kind of game, and I wanted to highlight that at the end here because I was like, look at Nintendo being creative and stuff in the age of mechanical gaming.
Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah.
This is stuff I just didn't know. You just don't think about. You think Nintendo started in 1985 when the NES came out.
Yeah, I know, right? And we could have actually gone even further into it, I'm realizing now, because so the way this book is designed is I was reading the very beginning of it with like the history, right? And then there's a big section in the middle. That's all the cards and games Nintendo produced. Like a pretty definitive list of all the cards and games they've produced. I didn't really even get into the games. Like there's a lot of board games they made. They made this like off-brand Lego style block at one point. They made a bunch of different things. There's propaganda games in here. Granted, they're not that big. There's like only like 1 or 2 propaganda games, but it's pretty cool. So at some point, if people are like, hey, we're really interested in that, maybe we'll go back and like I'll just pull a couple of these and we'll just talk about them like we just did just now.
Propaganda games are like really interesting to me. Like it'll be like World War II propaganda stuff.
Yeah, and it's mostly card games. It's mostly just the way they decorate the cards, like to use them to look like, oh, this is like a hero of Japanese like literature or culture.
You play the ace and it says loose lips sink ships.
Yeah, just like that. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so that's going to be all for today as far as this goes. I want to talk about the next time we do this, though. I've called this series Nintendo Before Video Games. We're going to do a part 5, but it's going to be mildly a lie, because the next time we talk, and this is at the end of this book, we're going to talk about Nintendo right as video games were getting on the scene and Nintendo's reaction to it. Ooh. So essentially Nintendo and what they thought when Pong came out.
Okay.
And how they reacted to it. And spoilers, just like a lot of other game companies, they're going to steal, because that's what a lot of people did. I mean, that's just the way, like, everyone had their own version of Pong, and Nintendo is no different. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about the onset before the NES, and maybe even some home consoles that Nintendo made before then.
Ooh.
And yeah, it's going to be a really good time. And we're also going to talk about like arcade video games in the 80s and things they did a little bit there. But not a ton of stuff. We're pretty much almost done with this series. And really, we could end it now, but I'm like, let's talk about the transition.
Yeah, I want to hear, like, we end with, and then the NES came out or something.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of where I want to go with it. But that's pretty much it for today. Tyler, what you been playing?
Ooh, what have I been playing? I'm trying to think. It's been a few weeks since we last talked about this, so I've been playing. I finished Final Fantasy 16.
Nice.
I liked it. Took me about 35 or 40 hours probably. PlayStation 5, really good. The combat was a lot of fun. It was a little Dark Soulsy, but I was getting it. I was into it. Maybe I got to go back to Jedi.
Ogo Bogo? Don't go visit him. Don't go visit the giant frog.
Yeah. So I finished that, and then immediately after that, I started playing Final Fantasy II, the Pixel remaster on Steam, because I was still in a Final Fantasy mood. And my partner has been playing Arkham Asylum. She finished Arkham Asylum.
Ooh, the first one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is the first one, Arkham Asylum.
Yeah, so she's on to City, but I think we're going to wait till we get back home and then just
Yeah.
gonna jump into Arkham City.
City was the one I started on because I watched a friend beat Arkham Asylum, and Arkham Asylum is a great game, but City is so different.
Yeah,
I feel like,
and it's a lot better.
It
It's
is
hard to
better.
go back to Asylum once
It
you've seen
is.
City. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Diablo 4 a little bit. I haven't played in a couple of weeks of Diablo 4. I'm like level 27, 28.
Ooh, nice. That's not bad.
So I'm making my way through the
I'm making my way.
through the campaign there. I think that kind of
Campaign gets nuts.
really.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'll just seamlessly flow into mine.
Okay.
If you go,
Yeah.
and that not so seamlessly because I just mentioned it. But I beat Diablo 4, and I think I'm going to say it. One of the best cutscenes I've seen in a long time in a video game to end.
Wow, really? Okay,
Mhm.
great. That makes me want to keep going with
It's
it. then.
not the end cutscene, but it's the one very close to the end, and it is so good that I was like watching it with my friend because our mutual friend helped me beat the campaign because the bosses get stupid hard. I will help
Oh,
you.
good. I'm excited for that too.
Yeah, when you hit a boss, let me know because it gets really hard and I needed help. And if I didn't have the help, I would have been really frustrated because our buddy told me he took like 15 tries to beat the final boss.
Oh yeah, dude. I'm excited.
Yeah,
for
so maybe you don't. Maybe you want to go for it. But I
I like help. I just like when it's challenging.
I had a buddy help me, so I did it on the first try because
Nice.
he revived me like 5 times, but it's fine. So I beat Diablo 4. I really enjoyed it. I just started the seasonal content today, right before you got here. I made a necromancer to play the seasonal content,
Okay.
which is pretty cool. And then I also, on my trip to Africa, I beat Advanced Wars 1 in
All
Reboot
right.
Camp. So I'm on Advanced Wars 2
Okay.
right now. Fun fact, I played Advanced Wars in a tent in the middle of a game reserve in Africa, and I'm like, this is 2023. Okay.
You might be the only person who's ever done that. Played
I
Advance Wars.
could in a tent on safari in Botswana. I
You
played
might
it.
be the only one who's
that
ever done
close
that.
to hippos. I was 100 feet from hippos, and I played the game.
Nice.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. But it was a siesta time. Okay, don't make it think like I was just sitting on my Switch the whole time I was in Africa. Okay, it was
Yeah.
like there was a siesta time in the middle of the day. Didn't know what to do with myself. That is a perfect time to play Nintendo Switch.
I guess you could have taken a nap. Isn't that what people do? Take
That's
naps?
what people think now. I wasn't sleepy though. I don't sleep at night that well. Anyway, but that's gonna be it for the day. I think we're not gonna do emails right now. I think we might save that for another episode.
That's fine.
But yeah, so I think, I mean, I'm gonna say before we leave here, I can't guarantee what our episode release schedule is gonna be like because Tyler's still traveling and I'm getting married soon. But we're gonna try our best. So enjoy the episode with Tyler and I hanging out.
Yeah, and the reason we say that is because we know that we're getting a little bit of like a little patchy in the episode releases. It's
Mhm.
not because we're like tired of it. It's not because we don't want to do it anymore. We just these 2 months are just absolutely nuts for both of us.
It's life. Yeah,
Yep.
life finds a way.
Yep.
I'm raising dinosaurs in my room. That's why it's really intense.
It makes it hard to like keep a podcast schedule when you have actual dinosaurs that you're
It
raising.
is, and I spared no expense. But
Yeah.
all right, with that, we got to talk about what you can do to help the podcast.
I know
forgot.
the Unix systems.
I watched that on the plane. Still holds up. The original Jurassic
Yeah.
Park. It holds up pretty well. All the funny parts too. It's so good. But okay, so things you can do to support the podcast. If you want to send us an email, you can do that at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. You can also go to our website, codexpodcast.net. That has everything on it. That has a link to our Discord, a link to our Trello boards, a link to our Twitter accounts if people still use Twitter.
X, you mean?
X, excuse me. I'm rolling my eyes. And then you can also go and send us an email on the website, too, using the contact form as well. Tyler, would you like to say bye to everybody?
Goodbye, everybody.
Push. And
We don't have to
are
time. We don't have to
record.
time our pushes.
No, we don't.
We
This
just
is so
sounded
nice.
like synchronized pooping.
We don't time our pushes anymore. It's like a Cialis commercial, but 2 toilets on a beach facing the ocean.
3, 2, 1.
Push. I'm putting this at the end of the podcast after the credits roll. Credits? We don't even have credits.